I'm going to start with what I call my archaeology poems. I've got a couple sonnets here, and they all kind of have an archaeology theme. That's one of my favorite themes. And so I'll just dive in. This is called Still Life with Paleo Junk. 3 layers down, our trowels scrape hearthstones, a charred ring embedded in clay for 6 or 76 centuries. Charcoal alone will tell. We imagine the whole into a makeshift kitchen. Pestles, picks, quartz flake confetti, bits of nibbled bone. The half-formed spear point, chipped too deep for use, reminds us that most often what remains was thrown out by others. Middens, privies, one-night campsites, and abandoned cities. These are the archaeologist's domain. We await our turn under shovel, loosely defined by plastic bottles, Blu-rays, unpaired shoes discarded along highways. This next one I just wrote, so this is really, really raw, but I wanted to I always see poets do that, and I'm like, ooh, they're so courageous. So I was like, I'm gonna try it. Do you guys know who Werner Herzog is?
No.
He's a filmmaker, and he did this documentary film called Cave of Forgotten Dreams, about the Chauby Cave in France that has cave paintings in it that are over 32,000 years old. It's a fascinating documentary, and I've watched it several times. And so this came out of watching that. It's called Cave of Dreams. What is a cave if not a vessel we enter to be wombed by earth and stone? Our dreams contour their horns and hackles and ochre handprints in tabernacles of bear skulls crowned in calcite crystal thorns, on altars forged in deepest dark, ash speckled with prayers that we won't crumble under the stampede of painted rock. Why'd we learn to curb our time in caves? Do dreams veer toxic with radon carbon decay? Sear our breath? Are we out of incense to burn? O cities and suburbs of gatherers and hunters, be reborn, wild bison, charging beyond these strip mall horizons. Alright, so I have a love-hate relationship with a poet named Ezra Pound. Okay, so I don't need to explain too much there. But I was very fortunate as a graduate student to go and study in Italy at his daughter's castle and at the Ezra Pound Center for Literature. And we, as part of our field trip, we went to his grave in Venice. And so I wrote a poem about that journey, and I have a little epigraph here from his cantos. It's a refrain that's repeated several times in the cantos, called A Little Light Like a Rushlight to Lead Back to Splendor. And the poem's called Last Rites. Even in the floating cemetery at Saint Michel, I remember I was raised with certain traditions. I know to spill tobacco for the dead, to stain milk with nutmeg for those without rest, to steep bay leaves in hot water to coax out splinters. And the first thing archaeologists learn is to get tetanus shots every 5 years, the membranes of palms and knees, soaking up minerals like sponges, each time we kneel before the past. Here, I remember what I've loved well as he invokes my name canto after canto. I call back knowing Ezra means help, never able to unravel plea from offer, and wish I had a cigar to split over his stone head. The dirt of his grave staining my nails sienna, and there have been enough seasons between his death and my arrival that I know it's a poet I absorbed through my skin. So another love of mine that stems off of archaeology is mummies. I just love mummies. So I have several poems that feature mummies, but my favorite mummy by far is Juanita, and she's an ice mummy, and she was one of the child sacrifices in Peru. And National Geographic did a big special about her, and it was kind of a big deal when they found her, and then they found many other children who had met a similar fate. But this is my poem to Juanita, aptly named Juanita. They say she spent her last moments kneeling, spine curved, arms crossed over her chest, head bowed, an ideal posture for the final blow. Ambassador to the gods, bred of royal blood for one purpose, to die before puberty could take root, before her breast could stir desire, before Mount Ampato could smother the world in ash. Footprints of DNA trail down the Andes, through Arequipa, Panama, Korea, Taiwan, witness to how far her forebears roamed. Ice maiden, savior of them all. Dressed in crimson, drunk on chicha, a flawless gift to the gods, betrayed by the fractured skull, shattered eye socket, blue spray dyed with hemorrhaged thoughts. It took a week or more for her to freeze to the core, time enough for her organs to reshape around her last supper. After 600 years, she shook the mountain loose, an ancestor searching for descendants, screen preserved in the shriveled flesh pulling at her jaw, her wide cheekbones imprinted in the faces of girls lolling at bus stops, knitting alpaca hats. Like all things Inca, they bent her under a Spanish name, put her on display within the cellar walls of the White City, rolled her over, knees curled in prayer, hollow eyes cupping the stars. Peru also has these amazing salt mines that are carved out of the sides of mountains, and it looks almost like an alien world. They're white dripping ponds, almost like rice terraces, filled with this white liquid, and it's all salt. And so I wrote a sestina, and as Luke said, why would I do that? But I instead of just writing a straight sestina, I wrote what I call a telephone sestina, where instead of repeating the same words, they change just a little from stanza to stanza, so silt becomes salt, bright becomes brine, just a little twisted. So this one is called Salt Myth. Somewhere along the road from Cusco, we tripped through two-way glass like Alice. A microscope's curved lens zoomed in on Maras, bright cells, creek-fed membranes, silt-scraped wounds welling with salt. My mother and I read patterns that etch this brine query. Rhythms that thread tubers in lace and terraced lawns, quilt mountains with endless corn steps, gridlock and lace stones in snug patchwork stacks that no quake can loosen. This same wind's fingers raked the hair of Lot's wife, threshed her open, unbraided the backward glancing bride from her own name. Here, loss isn't a girl stilled through sorrow into Stella. Here, we learn to poulbry, weigh the cost in labor, ourselves the libation, the poured-out spirit blanched from weeping bodies, grain by grain. The women, dressed in bowlers and heaped skirts, warn us, don't look back. Though the south wind's ghostly thrall palms our cheeks. Skilled looters reaping sweat from our skin, the whites from our eyes. Blessed wounds that remain undressed, weathering to ruins. So earlier this year, I was lucky to have my first poetry book come out. It's called Postcards from Red Litter. It's very pretty. And it's a collection of short poems, mostly tanka. And tanka is a Japanese form of poetry that goes back over 1,300 years. It predates the haiku, and it's actually what haiku came out of. And these poems are 5 lines long, and what really defines a tanka is that there's a juxtaposition of images in there, or like a turn, similar to maybe what you studied in a sonnet, where there's a turn from one thing to another. And so I'm going to read some of these. Let me see, I'll start with some autumn ones. Now, tanka usually don't have individual titles because they are so small, but you'll often see poets clump a bunch together under a group heading. So I've got some autumn tanka, and I've got different groups named after the places that I wrote them about. So here's some autumn tanka, and you'll kind of get a sense. I'll just pause for a few seconds between each one, so you know that I've stopped one and moving to another. The maple's maroon fire has gone out. How clearly I see now the beautiful stark tangle of what we planted then. Raindrops swarm in sideways, a school of silverfish eating their way through autumn's amber tapestries. Christmas catalogs come so early. Fat squirrels wriggle open the mailbox to bury nuts in this pile of dead leaves. Autumn's breath lifts my first gray hairs, a candle just blown out. Twilight crickets own the sound of zero. Each beauty only lasts a season, or we'd never let go. And And aside from Tonka, I have some other short poems in here. And as Luke mentioned, I do like cats, so I often have cats featured, sometimes in more happy scenarios than others. This one's not so happy. This is called Hit Run, and it was featured on eBurst Radio. Hit Run. The husk of the orange tabby seeps between the seams of the earth a little each day. A white picket stuck down her throat to lob her into the irrigation ditch. Stuck so deep it dislodged 6 half-circles curled in her belly. We keep vigil from our bicycles as life scurries back into the cat, ant by ant. So I'm going to go back up to Peru. I'll just read a few Tonka from Peru. And this first one I'm going to read it 2 different ways. One of the things you'll find with Tonka is there's often a line, the middle line can operate as what they call a zeugma, meaning it can be read as part of the first part of the poem or the second part, just depending on how you read it. So I'm going to read it both ways and you can get a sense of it. Dawn first gilds the temple of the sun, silver and gold, beaming in the corner, broom and dustpan. Dawn first gilds the temple of the sun, silver and gold beaming in the corner, broom and dustpan. Tourists line the upper walls, look down on the sunrise at Machu Picchu. Each stone below tilts to linger in the light. The Inca mapped and named the dark clouds between stars, tapestry now moth-eaten by flashbulbs. Vista after vista, wind rushes through the dark caves of our bodies, my whole faith, a land made mostly of sky. Nuns chanting in the cloisters of Arequipa, oysters shelled up give their lives for one warped pearl. Heading into the jungle part of Peru. And this poem, this Tonka encapsulates one of the most terrifying moments of my life for about 2 minutes. Night fills with a grim clawing. I peek out of my mosquito nets, mouse gnawing through my bag to feast on plantain chips. That mouse scared me so bad. Really thought it was the end. The Russian in gold chains plucks a piranha from the Oxbow Lake, shows me his yellow belly beneath razor teeth. So this week we have coming up the anniversary of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And my grandpa served in World War II in Japan. And so I wrote a poem for him based off just the few images that he shared about being in Japan after the bombs were dropped. So this is called O Tannenbaum. And that is the original German name of the song that we know in English as O Christmas Tree. So O Tannenbaum. He who hardly spares a word but for the weather found the German left in his tongue and sang over the static of ships filled with Midwest farm boys, over the wails of Japanese mothers burrowed into hills to warm the naked atoms of their children. He sang between barren mountains of bicycles, blistered thousands high, trees felled under human snow. So this next set of Tonka is from Hong Kong. Jet-lagged, I slurp my host's small bird soup, what I would be if I could dream myself out of this nest of jumbled bones. Alone on the rooftop overlooking the temple, even here someone plays chopsticks in the distance. Avoiding eye contact with night market hawkers, what I want, not as clear as what I don't want. Long distance call, drone of jackhammers and traffic. On the other side of the world, my brother turns 16, pierces his ear. I fill my mind with rain, map myself in vertical descents, wild garden of high-rises, gutters brimming with plum vendors. Move a little further north into China. And if you're not familiar with a lot of Chinese history, when they refer to June 4th, that refers to the Tiananmen Square massacre. So it's synonymous because they're not really supposed to talk about it in China. So they just say June 4th. Gridlock of kite flying. I trip again on the cracks in Tiananmen Square. Twin boys dressed as Batman. Twin boys dressed as Robin. No Batman in sight. She knelt here on June 4th. Shirt and nest stuffed in bullet holes. Today, her laugh 1,000 sparrows everywhere at once. Milky Way candy bar, standing room only. The universe melts in my pocket on a Beijing bus. Alright, so I think I'll leave you with some Tonka from Venice. Since I'm picturing warm summer days and these cold winter months, dreaming of Venice sounds nice. Moored gondolas, saddled by monochrome men, new moons drowning their hearts in what they mistake for sky. The lace-maker's hands flounder at the sides of her crocheted dress. Without pockets, there's no net to quiet these gasping fish. We feel our way through cathedral ribs arched along canals like beached whales, each one of us a Jonah seeking out a second chance. Islands sag beneath gelato-touting tourists. There are no Venetians in Venice, but even Keith Richards ate here once. Thank you.